Today I'm gonna teach you in this little graph how to make a raid composition for vanilla WoW, because we got a fresh coming and actually I got good news for you. They removed the debuff limit and that means that we're gonna get a little, not a lot, a little more flexibility in what we can bring to a raid. Now there are many ways you can structure a raid, but this is what I visualize, what I think you should look into. This is going to be a composition that is reasonable, that makes the mechanics more or less simple to deal with, but that has a really good DPS output, because you could compromise less stuff and go for more warriors, for example, and you could probably clear everything. But if you're not in a super try-hard guild with a bunch of gear and world boss and all that stuff, it is a little harder to pull that off. Talking about molten core in particularly, you can sacrifice a lot of your D courses and just go for straight damage, and that could work, but the average guild is probably gonna struggle with that. But this is my personal take on the entire composition thing. Oh, another news, by the way, we got dual spec now. It is not clear how it's gonna work, so I am gonna assume you cannot do it mid-raid, but dual spec might make it so a couple of the tanks, you can turn them into DPSers, so that's something you can look into. But very well, tanks. The feral tank with the manual crowd pummeler can pull a decent amount of threat, and they are simply not as tanky as a warrior, and they are not as good as a warrior, but they are possible. We're not gonna meme today, we're gonna take a warrior though. It is gonna say protection, but this ideally should be a fury prot warrior. This is just for making it visually easier to understand, and on top of that, for molten core you ideally want 4 tanks in total for Gar, of course. If you can get a warrior on a DPS spec and some decent tanking gear, they can tank just fine, so I'm gonna just mark them as DPSers, but you gotta understand, these will be off tanks, and this is where we are going to diverge. I am gonna explain to you the horde composition first, and then we're gonna talk about the alliance. It is very different, and you're gonna quickly realize why the alliance is so much better usually, because for the horde, we have to mandatory take a shaman every melee group. Wind Fury is way too good to pass up, you have to get a Wind Fury, and they are going to be restoration shamans. Of course, in the horde, going melee heavy is pretty much a no-brainer because of Wind Fury, and AoE healing, the resto shaman has chain heal, the most efficient AoE heal in the game. It is gonna make the melee experience that much easier, and of course, when it comes to shaman healers, redundancy is the name of the game. If you got like 6 shamans constantly spamming chain heal, just by the sheer fact that all of them are spamming it at the same time, you actually get very stable health. Now, we are going to need one caster group. That's gonna be a Frost Mage, of course. We need a Mage for the buff and D courses and whatnot. We are gonna need a Resto Druid, of course. Once again, the buff, we need Mark of the Wild. The resistances, the armor, and the stats are very good. And of course, they can also D-course, which is gonna be like the main limitation we go through. Then we are gonna take one Warlock for the courses. Course of Recklessness in particular is gonna be very important. Course of Elements is not gonna be important because, as you guys know, there's very few casters in a horde composition. We are gonna talk about that in a minute. Then we want to get one priest, once again for the buffs, for the shields, they are very useful, and for the magic dispels. This is the problem with the horde, you do not have a lot of magical dispels. Actually, priest is the only one, period. You don't have paladins. And for that very reason, you gotta get 2 priests. You can get them on different specs if you want, it doesn't really matter. As long as you got improved spirit and another priest to go whatever, is fine. You can get even PI if you want, it's the same. The reason we take 2 priests is for dispel bots. We need dispel bots, that's pretty much it. Now I am gonna tell you the min-maxing way and the Medina way, so to speak, the thing that I would probably do for... There are many problems with the optimal vanilla composition. First of all, how do you share the gear? Because you're gonna take... Actually, let me show you. That an image is more than 1,000 words. For group 3, we're gonna take warrior, 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 and warrior, and then we're gonna take one shaman, and then for the next one, we're gonna take warrior, 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 shaman. Now here's one thing I messed up actually. One of these warriors is gonna go to this group here, and we're gonna get a hunter, because you need tranquilizing shot. You need one trank to do all of molten core, of course. That's gonna be that one hunter. I put this mastery in it. He could do 0 damage for all I care. It's the same, but yeah, there you go. You're gonna need one hunter. Also the aspect, I guess. Now here's another thing. Rogues are fine. They are not as good as a warrior, but they take different gear, which is once again very important for this composition, that they do not take other people's gear, because gear is going to be a huge problem for the warriors. So having a couple rogues in the mix to balance out the gear is a great idea. And they they are almost as good. They are not as good, but they are almost as good. So you can take a rogue without feeling bad about it. You can take some rogues. So all these warriors that you see here, you can change them for rogues. That's perfectly fine. But the warrior is the better choice. You want to take at least one rogue, of course. And then we just fill with warriors and shamans. I think you get the point here. Now, you guys would look at this composition and think this is completely stupid. This is so dumb. How could this be a thing? And I agree with you, it is really stupid, but this is the way vanilla works. The warrior is the best DPS in the game, and stacking them with a shaman makes them more efficient. Shamans also give fire resistance to them, which is gonna be a huge buff for everybody in the raid, and they simply do the most damage. And all the mechanics in vanilla WoW, basically, here's the thing about vanilla WoW fights. If you kill the boss fast enough, you can pretty much ignore the mechanics. You only have 2 D-courses, yes, but you're gonna kill Lucifron 2 times faster than it's supposed to be killed, so it doesn't really matter. Everybody's gonna have Death Wish up the whole time. That's what makes warriors so good when you stack him. The faster you kill the boss, the higher the uptime on Death Wish and Recklessness is gonna be on your rotation, and that means the more you benefit from your cooldowns. So it's like a feedback loop into which more warriors means more damage, which means shorter kill, which means more damage, and that's exactly why you wanna stack as many warriors as possible in your raid. Also, having a bunch of warriors has the added effect that if the DPS pulls aggro on trash, it is not a big deal. It's a warrior, right? They are not gonna die from a melee hit from trash, so it is a lot more efficient to do everything. And of course, your DPS never run out of mana. That's also really cool for clearing fast. The warrior is simply broken in vanilla, and this is what it's gonna look like. Once again, remember, there's gonna be 3 of these warriors that are off tanks. We're gonna see how dual spec works exactly. I should actually mark them as tanks just to make it a little clearer here. They will be going Fury Prot, and they will be okay DPSers for the most part. Some of them can actually go straight up Fury and just tank on the fights you need them to. It is fine. But there you go. Let's see how many that is. 3, 8, 12, 14, which could be 2 more here, by the way. 18, 22, 26 freaking warriors. This is what peak vanilla looks like. Also, the added benefit of having a bunch of shamans is that if you have a bunch of shamans, they are spamming AoE heals constantly, so even when you're doing something dumb, like not decoursing too much on Lucifron, you're still gonna have all the people pretty much healthy and safe the whole time, just because of chain heal. Now, I think it is not as sacrilegious as you might think to put a caster group, another caster group here. It is simply not optimal, but it is something you can do, and it is not a huge deal. If you're gonna take a couple more mages, I would take more mages, once again for decoursing. Perhaps another warlock to help on guard, that's something you can get. You cannot take more than 1 restoration druid, because the HOTS do not stack. There's only 1 debuff for everybody when you drop a rejuvenation and stuff, and that is super inefficient, and also they are not very good healers, I'm afraid. But yes, as much as threat allows, this will be the best composition in the game. Now let's talk about the Alliance, and you're gonna see why the Alliance is better. The thing about the Alliance is that Paladins are way more efficient at buffing than the Horde, and also threat is more important than extra damage for the most part. If your warriors are pumping, they are still gonna be bottlenecked by the threat of the tank in the Horde, and in the Alliance that's a lot easier, and that's because of Salvation Aura. You're going to need 1 Holy Paladin to be with the tanks. That's one thing that you gotta remember, because you still need the fire resistance on Molten Core, and it is an aura for the party in their case. And then you're gonna take 2 more Holy Paladins. Why 2? Okay, why is it 3 Paladins in total that we're talking about? That's for a very simple reason. What are the blessings that matter for a Paladin? Salvation, 30% less threat. Of course, you gotta get Salvation, it is not a choice. And then you have a Blessing of Kings, 10% more stats. You need 10% more stats. And the other one that you can get is either Might or Wisdom. But if you're taking Might, you're a melee, and if you're taking Wisdom, you're a caster, so you do not need 4 Paladins to apply all of them at the same time. You know, one of them can apply either one to each group, depending on if they are caster or melee. So 3 Paladins is all you need in vanilla. Of course, they are very efficient healers for the tank, because they can just spam heals constantly in the tank, and that's infinite mana. They are very good. They are not very good at raid healing, but that's gonna be the next thing we talk about, of course. But then we go to the tanks. We are also going to need 4 tanks. Once again, Fury Prot, Fury Prot. We're gonna spin them something like this with a Hunter in here for Trank. You also need the Trank, don't forget. And then we gotta build our little caster group, which is gonna be a Frost Mage. Actually, I gotta drag the Holy Paladins in here. And then we're also gonna need one warlock of course, and one druid for the buff. Now, one thing you're also gonna see is that we're gonna stack priests. These priests that go in the melee groups are gonna be going Holy Nova spec. They can go PI, they can take, I am not a huge expert on priests, but you can take a couple variations of the build, but they should get Holy Nova, and their job is gonna be, once again, keeping all the melees topped off, and that's why they are in melee groups. And once again, what are you gonna see here? I would like to tell me in the comments what you guess is you're gonna see here, okay? You know what is gonna happen here. Warrior, 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 and yeah, we just fill up the entire area with warriors once again. You can take a couple rogues. As I said before, you can mix and match rogues. You do not have to. If you don't want to take a single rogue, you're still fine, but you should get a couple rogues. And here you go. This is the alliance composition. You can see it is pretty similar, although the main advantage of the alliance composition is that you have a lot more dispels. Magic dispels are a huge thing in Molten Core. There is a lot of magic debuffs that go mostly to the tank, and they are a problem sometimes in trash, sometimes in boss fights, and being able to have a bunch of dispellers in the raid helps a lot. Now let me explain the caster group thing, and this will also apply to the horde composition like I told you. If you are not a complete sweater guild, I think it is fine that you take a caster group on top of this instead of like one of the melee groups. And I think they should be mages. A couple mages. And why is it gonna be a frost mage? Because decors, that's why. You can take another warlock if you want, so you can put curse of elements. You should actually, because that way you can do recklessness and elements. No curse of shadow, sorry bro. But if you're taking a second caster group, you gotta take a second warlock for it. You would be griefing not to. And remember, there is no debuff limit, so if this guy wants to go fire for the memes, he can go fire for the memes. I don't really care. But you should take another healer, and this is something that you can have a little more flexibility on. You can take, for example, another priest. Of course, that will be the obvious choice, but you can also take a paladin. If you want to take a paladin here, you can. This way you would go from 26 warriors to, let's see, 6, 10, 14, 18, 21 warriors. But yeah, you can see it is a little more sane. It is still like very obviously stacked for warriors. Now you may be thinking, why would I sacrifice my DPS and my performance for less warriors? And that's a simple answer. There is only so many warriors in the game. There is only so many priests in the game, because if you're gonna take a bunch of melees, you need an AoE healer, and the alliance doesn't have them. The same for the horde actually. There is only so many resto shamans in the game. So if you take one extra caster group intentionally, that is that much easier to get a reasonable composition in the raid, of course. Another big thing is gear. You get 3 items per boss every week in Molten Core, and you got 26 freaking warriors, remember? So how long is it gonna take to get everybody geared up? Well, it's gonna take forever. It will never happen. Not to mention a bunch of the gear for hunters, for paladins, for mages, whatever is gonna get disenchanted because you only got one of each. So you are sacrificing essentially raid efficiency for gear efficiency. And people, I mean, why do people raid? They raid to get the loot, right? So it makes sense that you wanna optimize a little bit of that. I will leave that choice up to you. You can obviously stack it. I will tell you something, and it is that stacking warriors makes everything a lot easier. Killing the boss faster makes the boss easier, especially in vanilla, because in Era, it is not like in Sword. There is no hard percentage lockout on, for example, Ragnaros. You can one-face Ragnaros, no submerge, no nothing. Super easy to kill him after that. You can just nuke Gehennas before the fire becomes a problem, stuff like that. And if you're stacking a bunch of AoE healers, you can pretty much ignore the mechanic, because they will have the healing output to pretty much... I mean, they will not have the healing output forever, but if you have enough DPS, you can kill it fast enough that the shamans are going to be able to just keep everybody up when you are brute forcing the mechanics. And brute forcing the mechanics, of course, makes your parses a lot better. So sadly, I think warriors are here to stay. Subscribe, join the Discord, and thank you for watching.